from, well, I would say the end of August here in Colorado, because that's when I wrote the newsletter that this episode is going out for. But it's actually September 1st. Happy Labor Day. Autumn is here early, and it's splendid. Might be a trap. It might be swelteringly hot again in a week. But in the meantime, music is getting written by yours truly. My daughters have gone back to school, and that has me thinking about teachers and learning, and what a gift schools and learning both are. There is no substitute for having a teacher. Someone who knows the craft inside and out. Better than you do, more than you do, longer than you have. Someone who can push you, well, outside your comfort zone, beyond what your current limits are, beyond what you can think or know to do. There's no substitute for having someone who does, in fact, know more and better than you. And sometimes that's controversial in our current milieu, where we prize individuality and charting your own course. But I think it's true, because, not in spite of, my own being very much an autodidact. I've spent my entire career in software teaching myself what I need to know just in time, on demand. And the same actually goes for most disciplines that I practice. It goes for running, where I've taught myself everything I know about running by reading and studying. It goes for much of my theological education, notwithstanding the fact that I have an MDiv. And it goes for my writing, where I have studied many a writing book, but I have little formal training other than what we all got in high school. And of course, it applies to my composition. Again, notwithstanding undergraduate studies. My initial forays into composition were all far ahead of any music theoretical training I had, and continued to outpace it even when I was studying music in my undergrad and taking music theory classes. And so far as it goes, that's all well and good. Teaching myself is a good thing, so far as it goes, because there is no substitute for what a teacher can do that you can't when teaching yourself. There's no substitute for being pushed in a way that is difficult at best and probably impossible to do for yourself. I've talked before about the sense I have that my undergraduate studies were kind of a missed opportunity. It's not so much that I totally undervalued or wasted my time, but I recognize now that I could have done a lot more with the time than I did then. And I don't have that time now. In this case, though, I'm thinking specifically not just about the time I don't have to spend, but the teachers I don't have to push me. No one is going to throw a pop quiz at me, unscheduled, and see how well I know a bunch of harmonic progressions. No one's going to say, hey, here's a sequence of harmonies that only show up in 20th century and 21st century jazz and jazz-influenced music. Go. Tell me how they relate. That's not a thing I'm going to easily learn, or maybe learn at all on my own. Now, I've said it, so maybe I'll go learn it on my own at some point here because it's interesting to me. But that's not something that you can conjure for yourself in the same way. You can't pop quiz yourself quite like that. And so I think it may actually be impossible to learn those things in the same ways and quite as deeply on your own, on my own, as it would be if I had a good teacher. Not least because of the ways that a teacher can force you down paths you wouldn't go down on your own. Because a teacher will force you down those kinds of paths almost inevitably, just by dint of being a teacher. And a good teacher knows what you may profit from as distinct from your own interests and what you enjoy and the kinds of things that you want to go do. And a great teacher knows how to unlock your potential by sequencing those just so that you're learning things that are keeping you at the edge of what you can do. And also that each time you start getting comfortable, they push you off in a new direction that then unlocks further potential that you didn't know you had. Now, I alluded to this a minute ago, but I think we have a tendency to think that, especially with mastery of a craft, we leave behind the need for a teacher. And I don't think that's true. In fact, to the contrary, if you look at many of the best performers, athletically, artistically, whether that's high-end vocalists or musicians, many of them continue to get lessons and feedback throughout their career. The top runners in the world have coaches. Many of the top singers in the world have coaches. And I don't think that's for nothing. It helps to have outside feedback. And I grant that it is true that most top of their field creatives, whether painters or composers or authors or whatever else we might name, do come to a point where they're no longer in a kind of ongoing formal instruction like you would have in an undergraduate or graduate studies program in composition. But I will also put it to you that the best in many fields do find communities of practice, if nothing else, where they can continue to solicit feedback, where they can continue to get input from other people who know more and different than they do. And the different actually is a kind of more. If you know jazz really well, and I know the common practice era really well, you're going to be able to teach me things, but also I'm going to be able to teach you things as we study each other's music, as we talk with each other, as we bounce ideas off of each other. And so if nothing else, those kinds of communities of practice still give us ways to learn. And of course, we also have the school of reality. You show up to an orchestra with some music and find that this thing that you thought was a cool new technique is actually just unplayable. You learn from that too. But that reality that we still need instruction in some sense, even if that's coming from peers, is one that I don't think we get away from. An important aside here. It isn't imposter syndrome if you're actually ignorant of important things, or if your skills in those things are underdeveloped. I started reflecting on everything that's making up this essay because I was feeling what some people might call imposter syndrome, but I would call less educated than I wish I were syndrome. It's not that I'm unable to write orchestra music, even pretty good orchestra music. But if you put me in a hall with the greats, they're going to outstrip me on many, many axes. And even if you put me in a hall with the goods, a lot of people writing just media music, for example, they're still going to outstrip me by and large because they've practiced more and they've studied more and they've done the work day in and day out. I've spent the last few decades working on software as a craft, not spending all day writing orchestra music. I spend at best 20 to 30 minutes a day most days writing orchestra music. And that means that people who have lived in it, have been immersed in it, are better than me. And I should feel out of place when I compare myself to them. Not in a sense of beating myself up, but it's not imposter syndrome. It's not that I'm a fake who is somehow skating by. No, the music I write is the music I write, and it's as good as it is, but it's also as limited as it is. Imposter syndrome is real, but not every time you feel not quite up to the level of someone else is imposter syndrome. I leave that as an aside here because, again, it is part of what I've been mulling on as I think about how well my craft is or isn't developed and what it would be like to develop it further and more deeply with a teacher. There may come a day when I actually can profit from formal instruction again. I would love to, if nothing else, get to take some classes on conducting, because I didn't in my undergrad, and to have formal feedback on works that I have to deliver on a timeline. In the meantime, I'm left in my classic autodidactic mode, trying to lean on my ability to teach myself what I don't know. So I'll probably go pick back up open music theory and keep working through that like I was a year and change ago. And I may try to find some ways to do ear training drills and to dig into harmonic progressions that go beyond the common practice era, dig into some of those jazzy sounds, spend some time listening and studying jazz scores instead of just sticking to my kind of classics in the classical and romantic and neo-romantic repertoires. Just trying to really get a better handle on the things that I don't know and that I know I don't know. And will that close those not imposter syndrome real gaps between me and the kinds of composers that I'm thinking about, the folks who live and breathe this all day, every day? It will not. It won't. That kind of comparison, though, is ultimately a fool's errand. I could get stuck on that. I could get trapped by knowing that they're better than me. Or I can be inspired by the fact that they're better than me, and I can chase that kind of goodness and greatness by studying, by practicing, by putting in the work, and become a better composer myself. And let that be enough, at least for now.